Today we're building on rock. It's far away from the rock, but maybe that's the way people are building as well, far away from the rock. Building a house on rock or building on sand. There's no question about it. If we take those words of the gospel and we use them as a lens to read the first reading, we see the interior conviction in Paul, and we see the brokenness. He's very frank about it, like he was yesterday. We didn't talk about this yesterday in the sunrise stroll and chat, but I talked about it at Mass later. How Paul is very frank about where he was in his life earlier. And he speaks about the fact that yesterday the words he used were he was a blasphemer. It's interesting just to ponder that for a moment. You know, even today we're familiar with sound bites and news about some areas of the world where blasphemy is treated like it was 2,000 years ago. And it was actually the formal reason that the high priest used to call out the death sentence for Jesus. He blasphemed. And it's a cause of death sentence today in some parts of the world. It's the most serious religious sin. And Paul describes himself in those terms. It's amazing. And he also calls himself arrogant in the beginning of that letter to Timothy yesterday. And today he goes further saying that, or no, he goes further, he labors all this theme, saying that he was the foremost amongst the sinners. Foremost amongst the sinners. So that's a very big mea culpa, which we do at the beginning of prayer, often at the beginning of Mass, through my fault, through my most grievous fault. It's a very interesting position. It's like clearing the ground. It's like being completely transparent about our need for pardon, for forgiveness, for mercy, for grace. And then his total conviction about the presence of God in his life. How God has intervened and transformed him totally, completely, deeply. It's amazing to see that human consciousness, and with that solidity of that rock. You know, his path is so solid. Well, this is a big rock here in front of us. That's up to my thigh almost, and then there's the big one out there, still in the water, much bigger. Huge rock. Definitely, I'm not sure, maybe 100 tons weight. Building on rock. On September 11th, I was in New York 20 years ago. And I was scheduled to have a retreat for young business people in the Church of Holy Innocents, which is just off Broadway. I think it's the 37th. It's very near Times Square, in the famous garment district. Lots of people going there to work. Chock full every day. And then it was probably around 9 o'clock in the morning, somebody called me and said there was trouble in Manhattan. And obviously all the bridges and roads were closed into Manhattan, so I couldn't get in. And then I was able to be in there through a contact with the police for the next morning and be with the people down at Ground Zero in the city, really all over the city, because it was pretty chaotic. There were people, the whole city was stopped, and there were people stopped everywhere. There were quite a few stations for people to give information about people who were lost. Everybody was scrambling at the different levels of authority on how to deal with this. And in a certain sense, we're still scrambling today. There were so many decisions made, so much effort, so much suffering, and many decisions later that caused more suffering. The challenges of our humanity, of our human family around the globe, the scale of effort and peoples involved, and the very concrete suffering in concrete people in their lives. I remember I forget the exact date, but probably about in April or May, I had been sitting down in the shadow of the Twin Towers. I was wearing my black clerics, and a gentleman from the Twin Towers wanted to have a chat. And we were sitting down there in the shadow. His first name was Joe. And he was a strong, heavy fellow. And we had our chat there. I remember very well. He was sitting in the sun, and the Twin Towers was causing a big shadow. And the seating there in that public area outside was very suitable for both of us. So I was in the shade from the sun, and he was in the sun enjoying the warmth of the sun. And then his wife told me shortly after September 11th that he hadn't responded. There were two sisters from Ethiopia who were staffing a secretarial desk very high up in the 70s. I think it was floor 78. And it was only months later I found out that they had called home within less than 30 minutes of the collapse of that tower. And so they very well, good morning. And so there was no way they could get out of the building. I remember the following Christmas, and some of my brother priests who had been in New York for directing a course or participating in a course over the Christmas vacation, and how we went to Ground Zero. They wanted to go to Ground Zero. We went down on Christmas Day after lunch with the train, and I had a pass to get in because of all the chaplaincy work I was doing there in that whole context, and to get into right beside the place, and because of the connection there, it'd be too long to explain all the details right now, but to help a Jewish family go in to be there at that memorial site, and they didn't have a pass to get in, and the policeman said, "Well, do you know these people?" And I said, "Yes, this is my brother," looking at the policeman straight in the eye. I said, "Happy Christmas." And he said, "Okay." And so the whole family came in, and they had a very close relative that had died. And while we were up there on that big stage that had been built for the United Nations General Assembly with all the heads of state in September, we're talking about, the late September, I guess, a few weeks after the incredible tragedy. Then there were people there who were obviously also mourning. And to feel that pain in so many people's lives concretely, and continuing to feel that for a long time afterwards, months and months, the following spring, more cases. So there's pain of human tragedy hits very concretely. Sometimes on the news, it's a big news item far away. So many thousands died. Political decisions are made, military decisions are made. But when you start looking at people in the eye who suffered, then it becomes so concrete. And it's really hard to see practical solutions for this living together on this planet. A dream world is a dream world, and the real world is going to need lots of good Samaritans, lots of people on their knees praying, lots of deeply committed people who are willing to go down that path of not crushing, not hating, not being violent. And we have to have great hope, because each small act of goodness, of kindness, is a treasure. And it's a promise, it's a sign that all is not lost. We're living behind a veil. Sometimes the evil and the violence has all the attention. And somehow, because the way we're wired, that's what gets our attention. The media that focuses on the negative wouldn't have a market if we weren't reading it, if we weren't looking for it, if that's not where we were headed. So we all need to push against the negativity and contribute with concrete good deeds small deeds of education of a child, the deeds of soothing people who are angry, helping them to reason, the power of prayer, and the role throughout history of the saints who changed culture. Saul was transformed from a man of violence to becoming a burning torch of renewal of culture. I'm just fascinated by the transformation that is still going on, taking so long, but it's working, of millions of hearts by the gospel message. Message of forgiveness, of building again, of trusting, of recognizing each human being. It's overwhelming, for sure, for our human resources, but it's amazing to see the transformation. The transformation in many people's lives throughout history. And the theater continues to be troubled and challenging. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. God bless you. Build on rock. And that rock is not our muscle. And it's not our arrogance, it's not our pride. It's not our self-sufficiency. It just doesn't hold up. People, God bless you on this day that provokes so many different thoughts and reflections. See you later, alligators.